Hey everybody, welcome to Decelerator. I'm Rob Kenedi, and this is my show on tech entrepreneurship done differently. My guest today is Jennifer Yip from Lunch Money, but let's get started with the tech news. First up, 11 Labs. 11 Labs is an AI that takes text and turns it into a voice that sounds realistic when it reads it back to you like a human voice. Well, they just came up with a new product where you can feed it a prompt, it creates a voice based on that prompt, and then you can feed it text and it'll read it back to you in the voice that you want. So I thought, let's have it pitch some startups and let's use some of my favorite voices to do it. I'll let you be the judge.
It's an app that narrates your life in real time with my voice, Morgan Freeman.
It's called the iChopper. It helps you find the nearest chopper. Get to the chopper.
My startup is an inappropriate joke generator. You enter a target, press generate, and boom, you're canceled.
No. Anyway, you may have heard of Suno. Suno is a text-to-music app. You write a prompt, it creates music. Well, they just came out with an app on the App Store that allows you to type a small prompt and provide it a photo or a video, and it will create a song from that. So I was hosting a stage in Montreal at the All In Tech conference, and I was standing on my hands. Here's what it generated.
Got myself upside down and see the tech talk, flipping the script, Montreal stage craze.
I don't know what that was. Country techno hipster douchebag. Musicians and composers, don't worry. Your careers are safe for now. And onto Work AI, Asana, the task management platform, has created a creator studio which allows you to create workflows that assign tasks to employees amongst other things. So I guess if I'm receiving tasks from an AI robot, then I have to create my own AI robot that responds to the original AI robot, and then they're gonna have a conversation about things and probably promise things that I didn't even know about and get me fired. I'm excited for this future. And on the personal side, I found an Apple shortcut that uses ChatGPT and messages that responds to your friends as though it's coming from you automatically. In completely unrelated news, my friends are now finally responding to my texts. And in the AI's People 2 department, Anthropic, creators of the chatbot Claude, have taught the chatbot how to surf the web for you, gave it a series of tasks. Halfway through those tasks, though, Claude got what I assume was bored and started looking up photos of Yosemite National Park. So it happened faster than I expected, but I guess AIs are truly human, lazy and unproductive. And now our guest. My guest today is Jennifer Yip from Lunch Money. Lunch Money is a personal financial manager that takes all of your financial data and dumps it into one place so you can run an analysis on your spending. If you've ever used Intuit's Mint, you know what this tool is. But Intuit killed Mint at the beginning of the year, and Jen, as a solopreneur, is still going strong. Her big decision was, do I hire people and change my lifestyle, or do I stay a solopreneur? Fascinating story. She's a really great guest, really open and honest about her journey. I think you're really gonna love it. Have a watch. Okay?
Cool.
Hey Jen, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
So, why don't you tell us what Lunch Money is all about? Because I probably butchered it on the intro.
Okay. So Lunch Money is a personal finance management app. Mm-hmm. So, all of your finances in one place. You can aggregate from like your investment accounts and your checking and your credit cards, and then you can see all of your spending. So if you're familiar with Mint or YNAB, it's basically that. Mm-hmm. The reason why I started it is because none of the apps that were available at that time supported multi-currency. Mm-hmm. And so at the time, I was working in the US, I was kind of half living in Canada, I was also traveling to Asia a lot where it's very cash-based. And I'm very neurotic about my finances, so I want to know exactly how much I'm spending in one currency.
Yes.
So I decided to create a spreadsheet to kind of fill that need, and then eventually I decided that this could become an app, and so it started as a side project.
Well, let's show everybody. Thanks for coming. I'm just kidding. That's a good summary of everything, but we're going to unpack some of that stuff because I think your journey is pretty interesting. Also, so let's talk about where you are now. You live in
LA, Los Angeles.
But your goal is to be mobile, right? Live wherever the heck you want.
Yeah, I've been kind of, I guess, a digital nomad for I guess,
Before it was
maybe
cool?
7 years.
Since before it was cool.
Yeah. And I think over the years, I've kind of like figured out what works for me is being based somewhere about half the year. And then the second half of the year, I kind of like to move around.
Okay, but if it's temperate, would you stay the whole year? Like LA is temperate the whole year.
No, I'm definitely very weather driven. Yeah.
Yes, I get it. And sunshine.
Yeah.
And so, you started this company in 2019?
2019.
And we're talking to you in 2024, so
Yeah.
Mint has gone away. And we're going to get into this whole thing.
Yeah.
But you didn't think at the time, because Mint did exist at the time. I think Intuit had even owned it at that point. I have been using Mint forever.
Yeah.
It did have Canadian dollars. It did have American dollars. Did it?
It was like you picked one currency because
Oh,
it's
okay.
just
As
the
a
dollar
Canadian,
sign.
I
So
see. Right.
yeah.
Okay, so it looked the same, but
Yeah.
I've been really misplanning my budget for the last 10 years. Got it.
Yeah, like if you connect an American credit card and a Canadian credit card, it's just all gonna add up.
Yeah. Oh God. That explains so much.
I know.
So let's talk about your career origin story. You're not
Okay.
like out of school entrepreneur. You actually did some cool stuff. What did you do out of school?
So right out of school, I started my career at Twitter.
Yeah.
As a software
That's
engineer.
X for the new kids.
It's always going to be Twitter to
I know.
me. Yeah. So I was there pre-IPO. I stayed there for almost 4 years
As a
as a software engineer.
yeah.
Yep. And then after that, I left to co-found a startup. And then after that, I burnt out completely. And then I left the US and
Okay, so just honing on the Twitter thing because
Yes.
it's interesting. Pre-IPO Twitter, so it was Jack Dorsey, Dick Costello. You were saying,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
like the OG Twitterers or Twitterheads,
tweeps.
tweeps.
We call it, we were
Okay.
tweeps.
And it's really interesting because as a software engineer at a scaling, at that point, startup,
Yeah.
I don't know how many series did it in, D or an E? I don't know how far they got before they IPO'd.
Not sure.
But you were in the startup side, not the post-IPO side.
Yeah, I was on the just push it to production
Right.
and we'll see.
So talk about that. I mean, you joined, you're about a tenth of my age. So my point is you started your career right in Twitter.
Yes.
Twitter didn't exist when I started. So you went right into the Valley and you were living in San Francisco, were you not?
Yes, I was living in San Francisco.
Or in the Bay Area. What was it like working in that startup environment? Like what was the pace and how did it feel to you? And what did you learn and that you liked? And what did you learn that you're like, I don't know.
Yeah, well, I actually had a little bit of exposure before. I went to Waterloo,
so you did
which
co-ops.
has,
Okay.
So it's a program, it's a 5-year engineering program, and part of that is you leave with 2 years of internship experience.
Okay.
So 6 internships in total. So that was really helpful because I worked at large companies like Qualcomm, realized I didn't want to do that stuff. And then my very last internship was at a YC-backed startup in San Francisco. And so I was kind of and that was back in 2011, so that was when there was a lot of buzz
It was
happening.
new.
Yeah.
Accelerators were new back
Yeah.
in those days. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was super exciting. And then when I was figuring out what I wanted to do after I graduated, I applied to Yelp, I applied to Twitter, I applied to a small startup that eventually got acquired by LinkedIn, I think. And Twitter seemed really promising, so I decided to go there.
Okay.
And yeah, I think when I joined, it was 200 or 300 people. We were about a week away from moving to the new office on Market Street.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
So that was kind of cool to see the move. But I think it was an amazing, fast-paced environment. I worked on kind of an internal tools team to start. So it was less, there was less pressure of this is going to be seen by millions of people.
Right.
And that was
Is that how they test? Is that what most companies do? They're like, before we put you on the really expensive user-facing stuff, go make sure this thing that is important doesn't go down.
Yeah.
Is that how they do it? They're like,
No.
okay.
It was, that team, I just really clicked with the manager.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he really advocated for me to join his team. And it was awesome because it was an internal tools team.
Yeah.
It was engineers using the tool.
Yeah.
So I got really good at talking to engineers, talking to clients, I guess, in a way. And I had full ownership of the front end, kind of client side part of the tool. And that was super cool. We were on Ruby and then we switched to JavaScript, and then I got to learn a bunch of different frameworks.
Right. I forgot about the fail whale, the Twitter's fail whale, because it was all Ruby and it was all new.
Yeah.
So okay, what did you take away from that experience? So there's the there's probably some inspiring things because, I mean, at the end of the day, you ended up in entrepreneurship. No spoiler alert. So how did that color your perspective on entrepreneurship, both in a positive way? Like, were there things that you're like, I like these things. If I ever carry on, these are the things I'm going to carry with me. And then I'll ask you about the things you didn't like.
I honestly, it was never on my mind. I never thought of myself as an entrepreneur type.
No, but looking back now.
Oh, looking back now.
What were you like, oh, that thing that they did, every morning we meet from 9:03 to 9:05 and we do a knife fight, and it really inspired me. Like, is there anything like that?
Yeah, I think my experience at Twitter was really holistic. I got to work on 3 different teams, and it was like an infrastructure team, it was an internal tools team, and then it was the growth team. So I really got to see a lot of different parts of it, and then also got to see how different teams ran, like their their weekly meetings. We also, as a company, were trying to figure out, like, are we kind of like an agile base, or are we kind of like not? And so,
what's not other than waterfall? Sorry, it's a nerdy question.
I don't know, but we had like Jira consultants coming in.
Okay.
We had to that was an interesting time.
Okay.
Definitely did not enjoy that. I think as an engineer, it's hard to be like, all right, you're gonna finish this in like 2 weeks. I think things come up, or like, so that was something I definitely did not want to carry forward into anything. I was just excited to never see Jira again.
Yeah. We'll talk about tooling too in a second, but actually you should check it out. One thing I think is really cool if you go to Lunch Money, it's lunchmoney.com.
Lunchmoney.app.
.app, sorry.
Can't get the .com, yeah.
Let me do that again. So if you go to lunchmoney.app, what's cool is on your website, you have the tool stack. You have a page of all the tools that you use to run your business. So all the technologies, and it's actually a well done page. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
It's a lot of tools. But what did you... So going through that journey and seeing the startup, like were you metrics driven and people were bashing your heads about like daily active users, monthly active users, number of tweets? Like, did you have metrics that you were held to and people yelled at you at? Like, how did the company, the org run? And
I think because I was an individual contributor, I didn't hear that as much.
Okay.
It was my manager that probably heard, and then like the VP, his manager, and then
Okay.
But it was definitely, if we push code that brought the system down for a few minutes or whatever, it was kind of like everyone suddenly cared about what you did.
Right.
Kind of a
and
thing.
Then nobody cares about you ever again. So let me frame it maybe differently. So you came away from a scaled unicorn in startup language that eventually IPO'd, obviously, as we all know what happened to it. Did that color what you wanted to do with your time? That time, by the end of Twitter, were you like, did that change what you want to be when you grew up?
When I grew up, I love that. Well, the reason why I left Twitter was because it was growing way too fast and there was a lot of bureaucracy.
Okay.
And I think that there was a lot of the managers and the VPs were kind of playing tug of war. Everyone wanted a very high profile role, and so there was a lot of reorgs happening, and that's what I was seeing.
I see.
And I think within a year there was like a bunch of team changes, manager changes, and the final straw for me actually was when they took my project and gave it to another team, but kept me on like the existing team, which honestly it made no sense, which made me realize like, oh, this giant corporation doesn't care about, little me.
Right, the giant corporation of 200 people.
Yeah, and so that was...
Do you think that was predicated, like, there's a power struggle. Obviously, as organizations grow, you get middle managers, people are trying to make their careers, or their egos, as you were saying. Do you think that there was something about the rate of scale that had contributed to that?
For sure. I think it was all that. We were like what was it they call it, like hyper growth. We were hiring so many people. I think it was like every week we broke the record of how many people were in orientation. They were very proud of it, and it wasn't sustainable.
Right.
It just wasn't sustainable at all.
Okay, so we're going to come back to that when we talk about Lunch Money.
Totally.
What did you? The other thing is, like you said, you went the company you ran a company that went through YC, or you worked at a company?
Yeah, no, I co-founded it.
Co-founded a company that went through YC and 500, I think is what you said before. 500 Startups is an accelerator. So that was your next step.
Yeah, so at the time I was living with a friend of mine who had just gone through like a dev boot camp, and she wanted to get something off the ground. So every day I would leave for work, I would see her working really hard, and then I would go to work, be jaded, come back, and she's still working, and it's exciting what she's doing because she's building something from the ground up.
Right.
And she's, you know, she knows I wasn't having a great time, so she would kind of seed the idea of having me join on as the technical co-founder because she, you know, she went to, she's more on the business side. So eventually, I think like a few months later, I had that at the back of my mind. And then when that final reorg happened, I told her, I was like, okay, I'm in.
Okay.
Yeah.
What did the company do, just out of curiosity?
So it was in the pet health space.
Ooh.
Yeah. So basically digitizing pet health records, because if you have a dog or a cat and you want to board them or you want to bring them on a plane, you needed to prove that they're
It was
vaccinated.
yeah.
And at the time, you had to literally bring the piece of paper with you.
Do you not still need to? That's what I do.
Maybe,
but anyway,
I don't know,
So
yeah.
okay, so you then you went to YC. So you got into YC.
So it's the
Y Combinator?
YC Fellowship.
Okay.
It was kind of this, they were trying to do something new. It was like a pre-YC thing. So it was for earlier stage companies, and they
Right.
were thinking that they could prime them into...
It's a
to be-
pre-accelerator, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
What year was this?
This was in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were the first cohort of this fellowship, and I think they hadn't fully fleshed out how the program should be. So we essentially got like real YC mentorship, and we got investment money, and they didn't take equity. I know.
Wait, you had a demo day?
We had a demo day.
But they were like,
we were in
"Here's
a
a
room
bunch of
with
money."
Sam Altman.
Right.
Like he was roasting all of our startups. We had mentors who were like successful YC founders. It was really awesome.
Yeah. And then you got non-dilutive money.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot?
I think it was 125,000.
US.
Yes.
Yes, obviously because you're in the USA. What happened to that company?
So, me and my co-founder, we ran it for about a year. I think it was the whole Silicon Valley environment that really burnt me out.
Okay.
At the time when I was at Twitter, you know, San Francisco was kind of becoming a hotbed for startups. It was like anytime you go to a party, it's like, what's your name? What
Yes.
do you do?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, you work at a startup. Like, how much funding did you raise? Do you need like VC intros? And so that became such a big part of your identity. And our startup wasn't going super well. You know, I was trying to do all the scrappy things like put up flyers on the, you know, like poles outside and stuff. And it just wasn't taking off the way that we read about in TechCrunch.
Right.
And that really got to
So wait,
me.
you're saying that's not real? Okay.
Yeah, it was really hard because everyone in my friend circle knew that I'd quit my high-paying job at Twitter to do this. So every time I saw them, they would ask me about it, and it just really started to get to me. And then I think also the fact that I was living with my co-founder, we were running the startup out of our apartment. It was a lot, and eventually I burnt out like really hard. But I didn't realize I was burning out. You know, I was up until that time I hadn't really experienced
It's
kind
like,
of like
is it like the frog in water kind of thing, which is apparently not actually a thing, but the temperature keeps going up and you don't know you're being boiled.
yeah,
and, then
and
all of
I
a sudden
think
you're
it's something
boiling?
within my control. So I think I'm not coding fast enough. I got like pre-carpal tunnel syndrome. I think like my wrist would physically hurt.
Wow.
Yeah, and eventually I think I saw this stat that was like, what was it? I think it was like 1% of it's like after 7 years as a startup, you either exit or you die.
Right.
And then I counted, I was like, wait, that means I'm going to spend the rest of my 20s and the first few years of my 30s on this startup, which I'm not even like super passionate about.
Yeah.
And then so it just like kind of clicked for me. And I was like, I need to
Did you just like
quit.
flip the table, like, see ya, I'm leaving? Like, did you fold the company collectively, or did you like
No.
go find yourself another technical co-founder?
No, so when I left, you know, we had gone into 500 startups, and I wanted to be, you know, compassionate towards my founder, like my co-founder, who was really passionate about this company. But I also knew I needed to kind of put myself, you know, first as well. So I think the fact that she had gone to 500 startups, it was a very supportive community. I think, you know, at that time we were also still pivoting, figuring out like how we're gonna make this work.
Yeah.
So I like to think that I left the company in a good state. And actually, you know, since then she's pivoted away from a B2C company to like B2B. She's selling software to veterinarians.
Oh, interesting.
I believe.
Okay.
So it's still going
To their
on.
inevitable, I feel like everything just inevitably goes, it becomes porn eventually. Like if you don't find your business model, it becomes just like I have a theory around street-based stuff where it's like, where there's businesses that shouldn't exist. And you're like, how does that business make money? They just sell luggage. It's a drug shop. This is my theory. So online pivots to porn ultimately. So not that she has, I'm sure it's a legit business system. I'm just being stupid. But how did you know, what does like burning out mean? Everyone says you've burnt out. What does that mean? Do you like cry? I know what it meant for me. But what does it mean for you if you're comfortable sharing some of that?
No, I'm definitely very comfortable sharing it. You know, it's behavior changes. It's me getting up extra early so I could get out of the house before she wakes up.
Oh, wow.
You know, it's my partner at the time telling me that I'm cranky all the time.
Hold on a second. I better start taking notes.
Yeah, and it's just this like, it's just not having had, I guess, like a dopamine hit in a while, and you're just constantly trying to like chase it, but you don't know where the source might be, and it's just like, it sucks, and it usually happens it's usually very gradual, and then when you finally realize it, hopefully, you know, you do realize it, or someone...
Well, I was gonna say, is it a penny drop moment? Like, and then you killed 3 cats, and they're like, well, listen, Jen, like, or was it just like, how did you realize that it was happening? I mean, people can be like, you're cranky. You're like, no, you're cranky.
Yeah.
You know, that's how
honestly, I think it's having someone else, someone that you trust.
I see.
Yeah, because it's, you know, even though we were in the YC fellowship, we didn't get into YC, and I cried so hard that night.
To not having got into YC itself.
Yeah, and I, you know, looking back, it makes sense to be upset about that. You know, you work towards something, but I think it hit me a lot harder. I think it was the first time where I worked really hard at something and I couldn't achieve it. Yeah. It was really hard, yeah.
Did you, one last question about this, and I want to talk about lunch money. Did you not get into YC after the fellowship, or could you not get into YC?
We didn't get in. We applied twice.
After the fellowship?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was devastating. And it was so nerve-wracking to go into the interview, and then you have to wait all day. And I think the second time we got called back for an interview, which means they're on the fence.
Yeah. And
then we didn't get it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how long did it take you to realize that was weird? Right? Like that all of your hopes and dreams are pinned on a thing. And also your identity of like, I always get, or like not always, but I have a shot at doing things. Did
Years.
To look back on it and be like,
I think so.
Well, now that you're 73, I'm glad you can look back at it.
Yeah, it's it took a long time. After that happened, I moved out of the U.S. I sold all my stuff. I went full like minimalist.
Right.
I moved back home to Toronto. I lived at home for 2 months with my parents, which was incredible. It's at that age when you hang out with your parents, it's like maybe for a week over Christmas, and then you just kind of catch up, right? You never kind of go deeper.
Yeah.
And so that was really great for my healing journey. And then after I guess I took a sabbatical, I spent about like 6 months in Europe where I did volunteer work. So I was basically working in exchange for shelter and food. So
That's what I was going to ask you. Like, how do you? A lot of people, like, especially the very wealthy, not saying you're not, but a lot of people are like, and then I took a trip around the world. I'm like, who paid for the trip around the world? Because you see all these sorts of people like, I'm trying to find product market fit, blah blah blah, and I'm like, how are you paying your rent? How are you eating? How could you afford to do this? Was it you're just like burning through your Twitter savings?
So actually, at the time I was blogging a lot, probably for therapeutic reasons. But I actually have a blog post where I break down exactly how much money I spent over the 6 months.
You founded Lunch Money. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of it actually because, you know, I write down like where did I stay, and then I would like average out the cost per night.
Yes.
And then like all the forms of transportation, it'd be like cost per mile. So when I would like take the plane versus taking like Flixbus, which was this, But I break it all down, and you know, I started off in Thailand where I was like working on a farm, and you know, Thailand's very affordable. And then there I met someone who was living in France, and so when I was there, she let me stay at her place for like a month, and it just like snowballs like that, and it was like an amazing experience.
Cool. So you made it. You made it work. You somehow made it work.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you hear these stories, and you're like, well, that person clearly is rich because they have a yacht, and then they went on their yacht. And I'm like, well, I can be a better person if I go on my yacht. So moving on to the lunch money phase. So you said at the very beginning of the intro, you're like, cool. I saw Mint existed. It didn't work quite the way I wanted to. I created a spreadsheet. And there's lots, like Jen has a lot of good stuff on the Lunch Money website and around the internet. So I'm going to not try to rehash too much of it, because if you want to read some of the nerdy details, you could totally do that.
Yeah.
But you, like, cool, you want to start a company. It's like, you want to start a thing. So you decided, first of all, to just do it wherever you wanted to be, right? Like you just were like, I'm just going to do this. I'm like an accidental entrepreneur. After the startup that I co-founded, like that whole experience, I was like, no more entrepreneurship, like no more. So you built this for you?
Yeah, I built it. Well,
what did you say?
Basically, after my sabbatical, I came back and I was like, I got to make money again.
Mm-hmm.
But I knew I didn't want to work for a company because of the whole Twitter thing. I knew I didn't want to like start my own thing because of my past experience. And so I found this happy medium in like freelancing / contracting.
Right.
So it was like, I'll code and you give me money. It was very transactional. I don't want to care about the state of your company.
Right.
I don't want to care about your metrics.
Yes.
I just want to like get paid for this code. And so I had 3 freelancing jobs that I was juggling at the same time. And one of them was actually the startup that I co-founded.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Smart. That's the way to get money out of the company.
Yeah, so I did that for a few months, for like, actually, no, I think it was over a year.
Yeah.
And it was helpful because at one startup, I was like, at one gig, I was the only engineer. And then at another one, I was on a team full of them where there was like a manager who was much more experienced.
Right.
And then for another, I was like the web designer for this like amazing tech company. So it was a lot of different experiences. And then about like a year and a half later, I started to get tired of just coding for transactional purposes. And at the end of the day, like I love to code. I think it's super fun to just like engineer something. And so I decided that I would rekindle that love by starting like a side project. And it would be purely for me, and that I could like design everything because I've always loved designing as well. But when you're an engineer in Silicon Valley, it's like engineers can't design and designers can't code, you know, so you never get that opportunity. So I just took the opportunity to create what is now Lunch Money. I had this spreadsheet that I was using for a year and a half, and I had kind of structured it in a way that made sense in my brain. And so I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to turn this into an app. It just makes sense. And it was only just supposed to be for me. So I made all these small goals. So the first small goal was, I want to move off of the spreadsheet.
Yes.
And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll get like my mom on it. So then I had to add like authentication stuff. And then it became like a very, and then eventually one day I posted on Hacker News, a Show HN post, and it hit the front page for 24 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, and I got
CYC's come back to save your life.
Yeah, that's true. That's so true.
And so I got all these people saying, I want this. And this was pre-Mint being bought for people who watching this.
Mint was in 2019.
Right, like there was a glitch. The note Intuit had never said anything about Mint being sold at that point. So what was why did you post it? Were you looking for business, or were you just like, look, I did a thing? Or were you like deep in your soul, like this might be a thing?
Good question. At the time, Lunch Money had like 3 features.
Okay.
And, I would post about it on Twitter. I think I had like 20 some odd people like sign up for it. And I think at the time I had like basically coded all the features that I wanted. And so it kind of felt like I finished the coding part. And so I just wanted to see what other people thought.
Right.
Yeah, and then I read Hacker News frequently. I know that people post like Show HN, and it's a separate kind of like section of the site. So it felt like a nice little show and tell.
Yeah.
And I just decided to post it.
Okay, so it's more like, hey, I did a thing.
Hey, I did a thing. Like,
not necessarily, but there was a sign up link?
There was a sign up link.
No money.
I did have. It was like $3. It was like $30 for a year or something.
Right.
Yeah.
So you did ask for
testing
money.
the waters.
Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
there was okay. Magically you made money.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're like, okay, maybe this is a thing. This might be a thing. And you posted. Was it like yes, it's commenty, so people can comment on it. But then
Yeah.
you got signups too. People paid immediately, or they're just
No,
like,
so I got like 1,000 signups, and I think I had a free trial. Honestly, I think I had a free trial, but I made it so that the first payments wouldn't be required until like 3 months after.
okay,
I felt I was very self-conscious. I was like, I don't want to charge people for this thing that like.
it's easy to make. Is that or what was the?
No, it's just that like I felt like a lot of people had a lot of feature requests.
Right.
So then I felt like it wasn't good enough yet.
I see.
And then I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just like work really hard, implement these feature requests that I'd never thought about before, like a CSV import,
Right.
or a developer API,
Yes.
or analytics tool, and then it would like, then I would package it all up and be like, okay, like, will you pay for it now?
Right.
Kind of yeah.
So you would do the request. You would actually implement the request.
I would get
For
a ton
those-
of emails,
Right.
And I would
And those
figure
would be
out,
from signed up users or not signed up users.
they would be signed up.
Okay. So you're
Yeah,
like
they
the only way
signed up and they're like, oh, like.
is the mental narrative like the only way I can get them to continue to pay is by building this? Is that what you told yourself?
I mean, I had a lot of misguided mental narratives like that.
But let's unpack it. So it's like these were paying users at that point. They're still in the trial.
I hadn't. Yeah, it was a.
So
like
in your
a
head, it
3-month
was like the
trial.
only way that they would pay.
Yeah.
Is if they
To convert
saw this
them.
feature. And so you said, just going back to what you said that you had a lot of made up narratives in your head. Why? What did you?
Yeah, like it was web based.
Yeah.
And so at the time, obviously everyone's on their phone, and I didn't have an iPhone app or whatever. I'm not an iOS developer, but I felt like I needed that. So I literally called it the pre-mobile like pricing. Like get in quick to lock in the pre-mobile pricing.
Right.
And I would kind of keep promising that it was coming. To this day, we don't have an iOS app.
I don't even know what I would use. I'm a user customer of Lunch Money, just to be clear. This is how we met. I bought it. I'm like, did my research, and I'm like, oh, this seems cool. And then I read about you. I don't want it on my iPhone, just to be clear. I'm not sure what your users want. I'm like, I'm going to do it on my desktop. That's what I want to do. But maybe my use case is weird. Did you? A bunch of people signed up. Are you doing consulting at this time? And this is it's eating up more of your time, obviously.
Yeah.
Were you still paying the bills? Were you still bootstrapping it by consulting?
Yeah, so there was about a 9-month overlap where I was freelancing still.
Yeah.
And I was working on Lunch Money. So at the time I was living in Japan.
Yes.
I was spending like the winter in Japan. And so I would wake up at like 7 a.m., do all my meetings, do all my work until about noon. And then the rest of the day I would just go to like a co-working space and work.
Cool.
I loved it. People
That's
are
really
like, wait, what did you do in Japan? I was like, I just stayed in, I worked all day. It was amazing.
Did you know Japan's a nice country? No, you don't. I think one thing you wrote about that actually.
Yes.
You've talked about that before, and what I find interesting about that point is you wrote, or at least you said, that you were mindful of the time that you spent. I'm just reading my notes here. That you were actually thinking about that, and you did sort of recalibrate how you thought about time while you were there, and. One of the things you said is that this is the quote from you, is like, I didn't need to prove, I eventually came to my senses and understood that I didn't need to prove anything. What does that mean? This is not like a hard-hitting reporting, like, where were you on the night of the things? But clearly there's something going on in your soul where you're like, I was in Japan and I'm doing this thing and I'm having fun, but I should be seeing Japan.
Yeah.
But I'm also trying to build, like, what was the push-pull?
I think there was a lot of, at the time I had just left Silicon Valley, where everyone kind of pushes you towards a certain path if you're going to be an entrepreneur. Now, I had just fought that. But then, at the same time, it was the rise of Instagram. People are posting Instagram-worthy, like, pictures and stuff. And so I think maybe I'm someone, or I used to be someone, I don't know yet, someone who's very susceptible to that. I think it's normal to kind of see how other people are doing it and then kind of think like, oh, like maybe I should be doing it, otherwise people are going to judge me and stuff. So I think that's something that we're constantly battling.
That's true. Well, given the instability in many countries around the world, I don't think it's just a you thing, just for the record. Got it. So you're like, to a sense, you're like kind of like, fuck it. Like, on the one hand, yes, I should appreciate where I am, not necessarily Instagram food.
Yeah.
But also, I like this, so I'm just going to do this and fuck what everyone thinks I should be doing in Japan. Is that a fair statement?
I realized, like, okay, like, I've worked up to this point to organize my life in such a way where I can live somewhere else for 4 months. like, that's the way that I did it. That makes sense for me. So why not continue doing it the way that works for me? And for me, it's like, I love to eat. I love to like try different foods. And so that was the way I was going to explore the country through food. And then in between, I would code because that's what makes me happy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm curious. So you'd been through the sausage maker, you'd been through the Twitter sausage maker, so you'd venture at scale, you'd been through the entry level sausage maker, which is the 500 YC flavored accelerator incubators, and you kind of were like, these things work over here, but they don't work for me in this way. This thing doesn't work for me in this way, but it works for me this way. And you're sort of finding cognitive life fit. I don't know what, I'm such a nerd.
I love that.
But that's a book.
I know. You should trademark that
I know.
right now.
We're gonna buy the domain, right, Chris? .life. I'm sure that's a top level domain.
Yeah, totally.
Why not take some angel money? I'm not saying be a venture backed company, but say, listen, it'll, like you did before, like, give me 125K. It's just me and my cat. And I'm going to build this thing. I don't need the freelancing things, because the way I think I understand the journey is you started making revenue, but like, how many users did you have in the first year? Like, were you making like $20,000 a year or $10,000?
Yeah, it was very little.
So that's not enough to live, especially not in Japan. Why not just get a check from some fancy rich person who like, I like the cut of your jib. From the 20s, apparently.
Yeah, honestly, so, I had worked at Twitter. It went public, so I have savings from that.
Okay.
I was freelance. I was juggling 3 jobs, so I'm a big saver. Like, this is how my parents also raised me to be like to have like a very large buffer. Mm-hmm. And honestly, I didn't need the money.
No, but the question I think is, you're talking about working these, smushing in all these things. You could have said, listen, screw the consulting. Screw that. Somebody give me a check for $50,000, whatever the number is that is the consulting gig. I don't have to bifurcate my brain. I can just sit down and write code on lunch money all day, all night, eat poop, drink lunch money. Why not do that? I mean, you could have a big nest egg there too.
It never came, the need honestly never came up. I was honestly like, I was cooking a lot. I was living in Toronto at the time again. I was cooking a lot. I was just excited of like, all these people wanting me to code new features.
Right.
I was living a very simple life.
Right.
Yeah, and it just, and I didn't have a need to hire anyone else. I loved just owning the entire product myself. Mm-hmm. And I had enough savings to live off of, so it honestly never came up.
That's cool. And you had no headcount, so it was just you. So if you want to increase or decrease your burn rate, you just eat less. Yeah. That's basically how it works.
I think I was also really jaded because when I was a co-founder of the startup, we had to go out and raise money. Mm-hmm. And, we were 2 young Asian women going out seeking checks from older men. It just was such an awful experience that, that's one of the things I knew I didn't want to do again. I didn't want to ask someone else for money for me to do what I want to do. Like, I would bootstrap it. I would live off my savings. I would live frugally. Like, I was fine doing that.
It's such an interesting thing because even to this day, so this is being recorded in the middle of 2024, at least in Canada, and I'm sure this is true everywhere else, the gender pay gap is actually increased over the last 5 years, believe it or not, which is not what was supposed to happen. Do you find that, and also women-led businesses tend to be more capital efficient? They tend to need to prove better metrics before they can even raise money. I'm not talking about you necessarily raising it, but for some reason you still have to prove yourself more. Were you just like, I want to just opt out of that whole fucking narrative and just own my destiny? Is that basically what it is?
For sure. Yeah. I felt like I had an opportunity to represent my demographic and to show that, I could do it on my own. I was a software engineer in a male-dominated industry. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of men that were running things at Twitter. I had my fair share of like very sexist comments, even back in college, telling me I was like a DEI hire even before that was a thing. So I think with lunch money, like I just felt it was a huge opportunity to just be like, look, like this is 100% me, and there's no disputing that.
It reminds me, if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, there's an entire season of Larry creating a coffee store out of spite. Because the whole season is he's just like, he doesn't like this one coffee store. So is this your spite company? What did you make any decision? So like, what's interesting also is that, I mean, what you were doing, maybe not until recently we're going to get that, because I want to get into today's lunch money, was really called solopreneurship. I'm doing it all myself. I have no staff. I'm doing the tweeting. I'm doing the coding. I'm doing the dishes.
Yeah.
And screw owning any worries about anything else. First thing is, how did you think about, like, did you take any of the lessons from the YC company or from Twitter and use those as negative patterns about how you were running lunch money?
Yeah, no free tier. That's a big one.
Oh yeah?
We did a free tier with our startup. So difficult to convert them, and they were taking up so much of our like support channel.
Interesting.
So I was like, no free tier.
You have to pay.
Yeah.
But you had a free trial, but you have to pay at the end of that free trial.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just not support people during the free trial? I'm just joking.
No, it's...
Okay, so that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked before we aired the show, before we recorded the show, we talked about the typical SaaS style metrics. Effectively, you're running a B2C company. There's a cost of acquisition of those customers, whatever that cost happens to be, even if it's just in your time. And then there's the long-term value of those customers, which you're, I'm sure, figuring out. So those are metrics that you use to measure whether the business is successful or not. And I'd ask you, like, do you measure those things? Do you measure those things?
I do not measure them to the extent that one might expect.
Right.
Yeah. I don't
Because?
think... Well, because I'm running this business in a different way. We're bootstrapped and we're already profitable. I feel like a lot of times when companies are talking about those metrics, it's for the quarterly earnings report. They're already like millions in debt to investors because they took venture capital funding, and these investors, they want to see like the needle move on these little things so that they can, you know, extrapolate when they're going to get their money back or whatever. And that's just not the business that we're in.
Yeah.
Like I care about, you know, like how many users are signing up, but you know, we're in the slow season right now. During the summer, not many people are looking for a new budgeting app. It's mainly towards the end of the year or beginning of the year.
Understood.
And that doesn't freak me out too much. But I do track metrics of like how many people sign up, and then I also track how are people finding us. And right now it's predominantly word of mouth, which I think is pretty incredible. So yeah, I think my time is better spent worrying about like keeping our current users happy, figuring out what other users who haven't subscribed yet, like what they're looking for that we're missing.
But I mean, like, okay, so two things. One is like, you could use a metric like churn, which is a lagging metric, but it is a metric. And second, you, so I guess the question is, there are those framing devices, those framing tools, whether you're using Pyrometrics, whether you're using like SaaS metrics or whatever. But then there's the actual measurement piece, which is like, if you are a venture-backed startup, your ratio must look like this. So I'm not saying, are you trying to hit the financial ratios that you're supposed to hit as a venture-backed company? I'm more like, are they useful framing? It sounds like they're not even useful framing devices to think about, you know, like, do you kind of want to know what the long-term value of your customers are, just so you know like how much you can reinvest?
Totally.
So you do it, just not quite so reporty?
Yeah,
Is that the
I
difference?
do it more now. You know, we've been around for 5.5 years, so we can have, there's more history to look at, and then now I'm actually working with like a marketer, so then we're looking at that as well.
Yeah, I want to get to that too. That's very interesting. So just going back to the previous question, I apologize. Negative pattern, charge money right away. Any other things that you've learned? The reason I brought up the metrics one was because I've seen at venture-backed companies, they have the metrics on the wall. And they're like, everyone look at those metrics. Yeah. Because that's the metrics we need to hit. Is there anything else about your time at either of those companies, early stage venture, late stage venture, where you're like, this is not good. I don't want to emulate this behavior.
Yeah, I think it's the obsession over those metrics.
Over the metrics.
Exactly.
I see.
Yeah, it's very distracting, and sometimes you can't, you know, like I was saying earlier, the behavior of our of the market with regards to budgeting apps, it's not consistent. It's not like Twitter where, you know, there's like a high season for tweets and a low season.
Right.
Although I guess during like award shows seasons and stuff. Yeah.
And do you think that blinds people to actually what customers really want? Do you think people get so into it, like they're basically reporting upwards as opposed to reporting sideways to the team? Like, do you think it spoils the actual building of the company or the product?
Maybe. I just feel like these numbers, there's a lagging period, right? And so like how can you really attribute what you did to like the needle moving? I think also because I'm just like an engineer through and through. Like I've never had to worry about it, and what I've been doing, which is not worrying about it, I guess, has been working very well for me.
Right.
Yeah.
It's probably, it's like when you go into an industry, try to fix a problem, and you don't know anything about the industry. That is the perfect time to go into the industry, because once you know how it works, you're like, I'm never going into that industry ever again. So do you? Okay, so you're talking about like there's the.
Okay, I say something
Oh,
else
of course,
about
of
that.
course.
I think another reason why it's not as important for me to track those metrics is because that's not like the end goal. The end goal isn't like make $1 million a year or
Right.
have like 1 million users. Like
Right.
because we're bootstrapped, you know, it's a hyper saturated market. I always say like I don't need a piece of the pie. I just need like a little crumb, and I just
Right.
want to make the people that chose Lunch Money happy.
Right.
Yeah.
But is it okay? So you know we're going to talk about the future at the end, but what do you want to be when you grow up? Is this like a, you know, $500,000 ARR business or MRR business that poops out money, and you're like, that's good enough? Or like, what are you thinking about? Like, what is? I think the reason I ask this is it sort of sets how you behave along the way. So it's just like, I just want an NPS of 9 and $400,000 a month. That's all I need. Like, how do you think about what success looks like then?
It's a good question. The goalpost has moved a lot because it's a bootstrap business, because I was a solopreneur. There is no work-life separation. Like Lunch Money was the thing that would finance my life and what I saw for my life at the time. So at the time when I started, I was married. I was thinking I would settle down somewhere, have the family life, and Lunch Money would eventually be like passive income generating for me. And then that didn't work out. So then I really had to reevaluate what I wanted out of my life, because that, it really affects how I think about Lunch Money. And I'm fortunate that Lunch Money is, you know, it's financially sustainable. It's had positive growth from like year one.
Right.
And I have good amount of savings. I don't feel like I need to like keep raising prices and get as much money as possible from users. And I've pivoted since to just wanting Lunch Money to connect people and to help me connect with people from all over the world.
Right. Oh, interesting. So there's like, it's now you've really screwed yourself because it's your financial and your social life is what you're saying. Got it. Well, I'm thinking more about like, so like, I get it, which is, you know, if you have shareholders of any sort, public or private, there's an expectation. You've promised them a thing, you have to deliver on that thing. In your case, your shareholder is you.
Exactly.
So you can set the terms of your success. I guess my question then still becomes like, cool, so you went from a kicker on your life in terms of here's some extra free money. Yeah, I can go to vacation, I can buy a yacht every year. To actually, this is my life, and so this needs to generate at least enough revenue for me and income for me.
Yeah.
And I'm not trivializing at all your ability to find a thing that people want to pay money for. However, once you do, you will get more money over time. The question is at what velocity and how much, and what do you want to do? Like you can sit on it at 30K MRR and just sit on it, and there'll be some churn, there'll be some new users, and you just kind of sit on it, and it'll be like maybe that's enough. I don't know. How do you think about that in terms of like, because I understand that the future will change, your life will change, so what you will want in 10 years will be different. But today, you're like, clearly it's your full-time job. You've bent it into community. So does that mean like NPS matters as much as MRR kind of thing? Not that NPS is the be-all and end-all. Is that how you...
Yeah, I definitely care a lot about user sentiment. We recently sent out a user feedback survey that was super interesting. So people let us know exactly, the NPS score, how happy they are and how willing they are to recommend it.
Yes.
Gives us insight as to why they choose Lunch Money over other solutions. And also like how they heard about Lunch Money. And so it's like, it feels really good to say that, like about, I think 30% of people cited our company values and like my founder journey as a reason why they want to support us over other companies.
That's really interesting. So I see. So you're thinking that So that connection with the community means a lot to you. And so if NPS is the metric or whatever, or a few other metrics, those are the things you lean on. And then on the financial side, are you like, it just needs to pay my rent? Like, I'm assuming you'll have milestones that change over time, but at the moment you're like, I just want to be able to pay for my rent and my digital nomad lifestyle. Like, is that your next metric? Is that how you're thinking of it?
Well, you know, I hadn't reinvested in the company for about 5 years.
Okay.
So I was just amassing money. You know, I was
What do you
paying
mean by
myself.
like, you're just you're taking the money off the table to pay for yourself, but not putting any more money in?
Yeah, like I didn't hire anybody.
Right.
I didn't. I wasn't working. Like the expenses did not go beyond like the software and the tools I needed to run Lunch Money, and for like my salary, which I would pay myself very minimally.
Right.
Because I also had my savings, and so.
Right.
Yeah. So this year, I finally decided to reinvest in the company, and so because I had amassed over the years, it allows me to kind of, you know, try out hiring certain people, see like what it's like. Yeah, so I have wiggle room to kind of experiment a little.
Well, that's a really great segue, because I think, you know, you were on the solopreneur journey, and, and I think when you and I first talked, you'd said something that kind of stuck out in my mind, which is that you're like, and then I hired somebody.
Yeah.
So now you're going from solopreneur to regularpreneur. And it was a hard decision, or at least that was the impression that I got from when we spoke.
It was a very pivotal decision.
So walk me through that. Why did you step beyond the solopreneur journey? Like, what do you think the benefits were, and what worried you? And when was this, by the way?
I made all my at the beginning of the year. Okay. I set out for 2024 to bring people onto the team. I guess that, you know, I felt that for a long time I wanted to keep it as a company of one. Like I said earlier, it was my way to kind of prove that I could do it. And much like the burning out thing, I think it took me a little bit longer than it should have to realize that we all hit a ceiling. And was I willing to put in more effort and more time and more of my energy for just a little bit more? And
a ceiling of personal capacity. Just like there's only so much you can do before you run out of life existence and you need to sleep. Is that what you mean? Yeah,
I had built Lunch Money to the point where it was, you know, full functioning business, and with that, you know, it doesn't have 3 features anymore to maintain. It has like dozens of features, and now I have, you know, a lot of support to deal with, and I have marketing to think about, and it just becomes a little bit too much for just me. And so I could either let some things go, like not do any marketing at all, or just kind of have like a self-serve forum for support or something. Or I could see how much further I can go with other people that also love Lunch Money and want to see it grow.
So now you have children. Well, it's a whole other thing, right? Now you have your payroll, but you have these other people on payroll that you have to pay for. First of all, geographically, where are they? Are they just all over the place?
Yeah, so...
And did that matter?
It didn't matter at all. But we're all kind of in the same time zone. Yeah,
PST?
Our customer success manager is in Brazil, near Sao Paulo.
Yeah.
Marketing is in Pasadena, super close to me. And developer advocate is in New York.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Similar times. But again, I understand that you're like, I wanted to scale. I want to do something kind of different. I understand that is the decision you made. You clearly decided to hire some people. I guess the 2 questions are, going back to my first one, why grow at all? What was you're right, you could have kicked off. It's not develop any more features. You could have just let this accrue things. Why?
You know, it goes back to, do I want to keep burning out for this company? Like, I don't want to do that. I want it to be a good experience for everybody, and I don't want my users to kind of feel my burnout through the slow degradation of the product.
I see.
The other part is, you know, after I went through my divorce, it made me think about how I had a community of people, my friends and my family around to really help me get through that. And that really solidified in my head, like, wow, we can really do so much more as a community, as a team. And that was very profound for me, because for 5 years I was running Lunch Money on my own, and I was very fiercely like, owning the identity of being a company of one and still feeling like I hadn't proved fully that role yet.
Right.
Yeah, and it's also like I just started to have big plans for what I wanted Lunch Money to be, and I realized that I wasn't executing on them because I'm not an expert in those things.
Got it.
I really want to build out a great developer ecosystem. We're so lucky to have a large portion of our user base be developers because they all came from Hacker News.
Right. And everything's in career font, so by definition. Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to build out this developer ecosystem, but I don't know what makes an amazing developer experience. And so I decided to bring someone on who is very passionate about that, and so that makes sense. And so he's thinking about things that I don't think I would have ever, and so that just solidifies that was the right move for me.
It's interesting too because it's funny, like the company feels a lot like a reflection of you in a sense, where it's like, you're quite posty on the internet, whether it's social media or not social media. You're very transparent and you write and talk about what you do, which is, it's not surprising that Hacker News is the way that you got noticed, right? Like you didn't put ads in a newspaper. Secondly, like coming into the business developer, like I use Lunch Money as a user. I'm not sure, I could probably put my mom on it, but it feels very techy in the sense that it's like it's not that it's a consumer can't use it, but it feels like it's come from a technical direction, right? Where it's not trying to dumb things down for you. There's like, you can pull knob. You don't have to do anything, but you can pull knobs and push levers and get it to do things in a certain way. So it feels like it's a bottom-up kind of product, if that makes any sense. And there's a lot of other, it's not like the other one that like just dumps everything into Google Sheet. That's a whole other nerd experience. This is a proper web app. But the reason I'm bringing that up is that you, just thinking about your leaning on community. You mentioned community. Do you need community to get this done as I guess a fundamentally bootstrapped entrepreneur, or do you need community? Like, is this a Gen thing where you're like, this is how I express myself, this is how I think I can get customers, this is what I'm best at, so the way I'm going to find them is by doing community, not in a cynical way, just in a natural way, and why you leaned on the developer thing in the first place, because you're like, I know what I can do, bring more people on the platform, because creating an API is not the second thing you do. Usually you do that later when the product is robust, it's got zillions of users, like, what can we do with this user group? You're still acquiring users and building the business. Does any of that make sense? Was that a question? Do you need, as an entrepreneur building a bootstrap company, it's expensive to acquire customers. It has a developer tint to it. Anybody can use it, but it has a developer vibe to me, at least to it. And you mentioned the API stuff. Do you need to create community to acquire customers when you're bootstrapped? Because it's such a noisy environment. Like, you're not building new technology, you're using Plaid and a bunch of other stuff to pull some stuff together. So I'm not trivializing the work, but this isn't like I own this very special patent that nobody can do and it took 100 years to research. Do you think that you need community? One, as an entrepreneur who's bootstrapping needs community? Or you're like, no, I don't know, but this is my superpower, so I lean on that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a good observation as well. I don't think you need community to be successful. I think that, like what you said earlier, this company is an extension of me, and I have really leaned into using it as a form of expression and a way to kind of see what I want to see in the world, like to create what I want to see in the world. So, I'm a consumer. I know what it's like to be a patron of a company that is very hyper fixated on profits. So I know what it's like when they like raise prices and all that stuff. And with Lunch Money, I just want to kind of be the change that I want to see in the world and kind of be like, hey, guess what? Like, to businesses and to consumers, like, we don't all have to be evil, corporations.
Speak for yourself.
But yeah, I think it's fun to kind of throw something in the mix and be like, oh, well, look how Lunch Money's doing it. Like, they're grandfathering everyone into the original pricing plan that they signed up at, and they're being very like community driven, and they're being transparent about the way that the company is run. Like, I love writing writing's a great form of expression for me, and I especially love writing about lunch money and my thought process. Because I think there isn't enough articles out there of like the nitty gritty of how to run a business. And a lot of times when you have like a venture backed company, there's a playbook, obviously like you need to make the investors money again. And so it's very like cut and dry. Whereas I think, running a company is also a creative act as well. Kind of like, okay, let's just think about how differently we can do this and maybe inspire other future entrepreneurs to think that way as well.
Right. So is why you're building in public. Because the other thing you say is you talk about transparency a lot, which again is the same question. Do you think I know the answer? Do you need to be transparent while doing this? Is that the way you build trust with your customer group? Which is basically what you're saying is we don't trust these bigger companies. They're just who are they in it for? I guess is the question. And so do you think you need to be transparent to generate that trust to build a business like yours?
I think that when people understand the story behind something, they tend to be, they're more supportive of it because they can understand the human aspect behind it, and it makes them like excited to kind of be in on it in a way. And that's what I'm drawing on. Right. It's not a business decision. I'm not like
I will be authentic now.
Right.
I will be transparent.
Yeah, it's like I don't have a writing schedule like every month I have to put something out, but I have a list of fun content ideas where I want to share things that I think people would be interested in reading about. And it's a form of therapy for me because I also want to go back, some years later and look back and be like, wow, like this is the blog post I wrote about lunch money when I was in a totally different state of mind. And it's really cool to see how things evolve.
What about the one last thing is before we get to the future of lunch money is you have a sort of a pseudo pay what you can model.
Yeah.
So there's like a minimum payment. You have to pay at least some amount to use lunch money, and then you can drag the slider. I don't know how high the number goes. I know
150.
There you go. So I guess then maybe there's two questions. One is why pay what you can-ish, and why did you stop at $150?
Yeah, the pay what you can model. I mean, pricing is so difficult to get right, and
Mint was free at the time you launched
free.
lunch money. Mint was free.
Yes.
So did people understand, because they're developers, did they understand the value proposition of it's your data? That was the key differentiator?
Yeah, the developers definitely understood, if you're not paying, then you are the product.
Right. Thank you for finishing the actual words of my question.
Yeah, in the beginning, I wanted lunch money, when I was more profit driven. And, I wasn't making any money and I was in a rush to kind of hit profitability, or at least like ramen profitability. So I was thinking lunch money would be the premium offering on the market where you would pay a lot for like this nicely designed version of Mint, and you would have access to the founder for support and all that.
Right.
And so I kept raising the prices, and then at a certain point I would start to get emails from people from like Vietnam or Argentina, and they found lunch money and they really want to use it, but they can't afford $100 a month because that's their food budget for the month or something.
Right.
And so I started to dole out, anywhere from 50 to 90% off discounts for these people. I really felt a lot of compassion for them, and I was just happy that they would take the time to, they tried, they reached out and they let me know that they wanted to support me. And yeah, the volume of those requests started to get larger, and then when I was really thinking about community and wanting to expand the lunch money community worldwide, it just made sense to me to have this sliding pricing model to kind of show this is for everyone. This isn't just for like techies and SF that can pay $100 a month.
Did you run an experiment?
Or $100 a year, sorry.
Yeah. Way cheaper. Did you run an experiment where you're like, I'm going to let the slider go up to 1,000? And like, how did you pick 150 as the top?
Good question. I think after that, I'm just like, ooh, I think they're going to expect a lot more from me that I can't deliver.
And then is there like, you said that, the key thing was to charge. Like I asked you, what do you learn from your previous startup? You're like, charge money right away.
Yeah.
You think that even a nominal amount of money creates an amount of value, respect from the users back to you? Is that why it's not just free? Like you don't have a free tier, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, the free tier, I mean, I wouldn't even know how to like structure the product.
Yeah.
Honestly, the free
You
tier
get the report
complicates.
stops at 2019, no matter what you do.
Like 10 transactions.
Exactly.
None of it makes any
Okay.
sense, right? Yeah, it's just, I think, I don't know, it's also a form of like self-respect too. It's like, I'm doing this, I'm bootstrapping it, I'm already being very generous, I think. And so I think it's fair to have.
And people are okay, like even in 2024 when it's like, oh, everything's a SaaS. For the love of God, everything is a SaaS.
And everything's a subscription model.
Everything's a subscription model.
Yeah.
Like, I understand as the creator why you want it to be that way. As the consumer, you're like, here's another thing that I'm adding to my non-business SaaS stack. Is it you've got just an affinity group of people who just get it and there's like, I understand that you need to live and I understand this provides me value, so I'm willing to pay? Or is there like a screw Google, I don't want to be the product kind of mentality? Or both, I'm sure.
You know, at the end of the day, we're still a business, right?
Yeah.
I still need to make money. This isn't like, we're not a nonprofit or anything. And so I think it makes sense. The thing is, when Mint shut down, that's when I heard a lot more like, you know, I don't want to pay. Why do I have to pay for that? Because it's hard to get people to start paying for a service that they were used to having for free.
Yes.
But we did convert a lot
But it also
of
went away.
Exactly.
Because it was free.
Yeah,
right?
but you know, not a lot of people understand that still.
They didn't understand. I understand that they don't know how they made money.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, the free thing went away. I wonder why.
Yeah.
Like nobody.
Some people, I think they're okay. Like they would rather not pay for something and potentially have that thing eventually go away. But at least they saved that chunk
That
of money
period
and
of
they were
time.
able to like, you know, move their data to another platform. And then there was another section of users that understood like, oh, okay, I should pay for something.
Got it.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to one last question before we talk about the future, and you actually brought up a really interesting point that I wanted to hit on. The non-venture back path. So you have capital, you have shit tons of capital, pardon my French, where you can just run of a bunch of experiments. So like the last decade has been, with capital, it's been take money, buy humans, figure out if there's a business.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what the model is. Aside from not having a gigantically filled bank account with, you know, gold bars, which would be useful to do the things that you want to do, what are the advantages you found doing it I don't want to say the slow way because it's not necessarily slow, but the non-venture way? Like, and yes, there's the obvious, sure, there's not a VC or somebody looking over your shoulder saying, what are those metrics? And you're doing that. You've already said about that. But is there something valuable by building the company the way you're doing it that you've found to juxtapose against the other two?
Yeah, it's, you know, when you to repeat what you said, when you take venture capital money, you start off your company millions of dollars in debt. Mm-hmm. The investor they're not putting all of their millions into you. They put it into like dozens, if not hundreds of other companies. Mm-hmm. And so they don't necessarily need you to succeed, but you need you to succeed.
Right.
And yeah, you do the hyper growth thing. You probably don't even have product market fit yet, but you're convinced that money will help you figure it out.
Yes.
And so it becomes a very kind of like you know the QWOP game, where it's kind of like this game where you use like QWOP on the keyboard and each letter corresponds to a limb and you're supposed to try to coordinate it so that the QWOP guy goes to the end of the finish line, but there's too many limbs moving, you always eventually end up falling.
Okay.
I feel like that's what it's like, where you just put a bunch of money into things and like more often than not it fails. Whereas like the bootstrapped route, like for me, like it only works if you like proved it out yourself eventually.
Right.
So in the beginning, you know, when I was working on Lunch Money, I was also I was also freelancing.
Yes.
And so I had time on my side. I could just work on it on evenings. It didn't matter if I was going to launch like a few months later or a few years later. Like it was on my timeline. And then when it started to gain traction, that's when I realized I had product market fit. And along with that, I started to get a little bit of money trickling in, mm-hmm. you know? And so it's a more sustainable path.
I definitely like on the continuum of venture-backed versus bootstrapped. If you're like venture-backed, you have a certain set of problems.
Yeah.
So much money, got to fire hose it, something will work.
Yeah.
On the bootstrap side, there's the existential problem. It's like, I need to exist. I need to eat. I need lunch money to eat. And so that was funny. It was so not funny. You know, and so when I found, at least running companies that are bootstrapped, I have found the existential angst of worrying about the bootstrapped piece and worrying about your lunch can take you away from the focus of trying to build a company, you know? And the side hustle sometimes can also be a distraction from the company, because you're like, you have somebody who's angry at you, whereas at your own company, you're angry at you, but you don't matter as much as the person who's yelling at you and who writes the checks.
Yeah.
So there's a focus thing, I think, a little bit, and you have to be pretty self-motivated.
I was so self-motivated. To be honest,
Yeah.
it took me like maybe 2 or 3 years before I realized I actually had a business. I didn't think of it as a business or a company for a long time.
I see.
To me, it was a side project that people enjoyed using.
I see. And so, like, is it fair then to say it's like the fact that people are paying for things and they're voting with their dollars directly gives you feedback. There's no indirect feedback where you're making up metrics and you're trying to, maybe this goes back to the point you're making about metrics generally, which is like, I get my metrics by how many people are signing up and how many people are quitting.
Yeah.
And are people even using the damn thing? That's the metrics I have. That is as close to the ground as you can possibly get.
Yeah, I think when you're venture backed, you look at like total addressable market, and it's in the millions of users, and so you're counting your users by like thousands or hundreds of thousands in growth. I was happy to just have like, I don't know, 10 when I had 10. I was happy to have 100. I was like shocked that I even had that many, and so I wasn't. Yeah, I was constantly finding myself in a position that I never imagined, and I just relished in that.
And share what you're comfortable with, but what metrics can, like, how many users do you have? What, like, is there an average subscription dollar? What's the total? Like, do you have any metrics you can share with the audience about where you're at today in 2024?
Yeah, so today we are at 5,000 paying users in 30 plus different countries. And the MRR, it's like, it fluctuates, but it averages around like 35K.
That's amazing.
USD.
That's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
That's really cool.
Thank you.
I could use that as my, but no, it's great. It's great. And it's been fun. It's a fun product to use. So let's talk about what's next.
Okay.
What's next? We sort of talked about goal setting already, but I think you said by the end of the year you want to have, or you want to have at least a group of humans around you that are helping with the parts that you're not necessarily good at, or at least to help you scale. Is that fair?
Yes.
And you'll have initiated a community outreach that's beyond just online.
Yes.
Or at least beyond just transactional for online things. How are you going to set your next set of goals? Is it just like how you feel today, looking at what you want to do? Yeah? That's how you're doing it?
You know, honestly, like the way I look at everything in my life, lunch money included, is like, you know, when you play a video game and, you know, you're on a map and you kind of only see immediately, and then you go forward and then that part of the map reveals itself.
Right.
Yeah, I think any move you make, it's gonna like change like the next few steps. And so why think about like, oh, I'm gonna eventually end up on this like piece of the map that hasn't even, like the path there hasn't even revealed itself yet. So I'm more kind of like, all right, let's see how it turns out with like our first community meetup, and then we'll figure out what, you know, what the next few ones look like. Let's see how it ends up being, like working with these people.
Right. So you're being very pragmatic about where you are at the time. I learned that as I've started to cover the map, I'm actually walking on a plank, and I'm wondering where the end of the plank is. It's just one very straight direction. How do you enforce the goals that you set for yourself because it's you?
That's a great question. You have to be so organized with your thoughts. I think, you know, we all deal with this where we have like our exciting ideas that are maybe like out in the horizon like 1 to 2 years, and then we have like the practical things that we should focus on. As I'm bringing more people on, I'm realizing the difference between the two a lot more. So this is something I'm actively trying to work through. It's always a learning experience.
But is it like you sitting alone? Well, this is what I would do when I was in New York. I'd sit alone in a park with a pen and a piece of paper, and I'm like, what the hell am I doing? Am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Plus psychiatrists and coaches, the whole phalanx. Do you have any other, it can't just be, or is it just you? Are you so self-disciplined that you actually have the ability to do that?
I give myself, I tend to plan everything on a weekly basis. So I allow myself to reset.
So you have 1 week sprints? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I allow myself to reset how I think about things the next week. If I set out to do something 1 week and then didn't end up working out or whatever, then it gives me an opportunity to reevaluate if that's, yeah, it's a lot of like, it's a lot of looking inwards as well and being like, all right, I know this is important to do, but like, why am I not doing it? Like, where's the lack of motivation coming from? So it's a lot of introspection too.
So you're just really, you've done a good job of working on yourself
Yeah.
and in it, on it and in it. And somehow you're mature enough to be able to do it without the help of others. Good for you. One criticism that's often, sorry, let me do that again because I was moving. One criticism or concern that I get asked a lot for the non-venture backed businesses is you've got like the initial, either an angel or initial traction or whatever, you've got a bunch of capital over here. And then you've got scale. And I'm not saying you necessarily want to get to some ridiculous size scale,
Yeah.
but there is a growth capital phase. Whether it's bank loans, whether it's like, how do you, and bank loans only get you to a certain point too, because you have to have a revenue coming in. How do you think about this sort of like, ultimately this, maybe it's on the dark part of the map, this sort of like dead zone where it's like, we need growth capital. What kind of growth capital
Right.
can I get? What does that even look like? Venture sort of has been playing many roles in our society. One of them is that. It's been bundled up with a whole bunch of other stuff. But one of the rules is, well, the bank won't lend you money because your P&L doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I'm like, no, I see this is going somewhere. It's like, you're not doing bank loans, you're not doing private equity because you're not, selling to Bain Capital
Yeah.
or whatever the heck you're doing. Do you think about that? Are you worried about that? Is it a later gen problem?
No, I definitely think about that. I'm a very, I need to feel safe in what I'm doing. So, for example, one advantage of being bootstrapped is we don't really talk about runway the way that venture-backed companies do. They literally have an amount of time before they're gonna implode. Yeah. So I also want to be clear: the people that I hired, they're all part-time and they're all contractors.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And
That
I
was
think,
intentional too.
Yes, that was super intentional. I definitely don't have the money to hire 3
Right.
full-time,
With benefits.
exactly, American-based
Yes.
workers.
Yes.
And it's working out really well. They work, between 20 and 60 hours
Is it like
a
an
week.
hourly pay, or you're like,
Yeah,
no?
it's hourly.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah, and
Interesting.
everyone that I work with, they're very seasoned. They're very efficient.
Is that nerve-wracking? Because I always worry about with hourly. You're like, oh God, don't spend too much time on this thing.
Yeah, it's a lot of trust.
Because you have to and you have to manage it to an extent. No,
Yeah.
that they're not wasting their time.
Yeah, it's I trust them completely. I try not to micromanage. The reason why I brought them on is because I'm not an expert at all, for what they're experts in, and the fit was great. Like, they are people that burnt out as well from the corporate world. They also have savings, so they're not in this for the money.
Right.
They just miss working on what they're good at.
Right.
And when
right.
when you're really good at something, you end up being like a VP at a company, and then you end up having all these other like
You're managing people and not doing
responsibilities.
things. Yeah, totally.
You have to like figure out the mask mandate at work or something.
Right,
and so it cuts all of that out, and they put in the hours, they do what they're good at. I love it. We're super efficient, and it's great.
And so going back to the growth capital
Yeah.
part, are you just like, what's noodling in the back of your mind there? Is that something you're worrying about? You're like, no, the pace we're going to grow at,
Yeah.
it won't really.
Yeah, so I know that, I did the math.
Okay. In lunch money.
So I did the math in a spreadsheet, and we have at least a year of having all these people on at a capacity higher than they're working at currently. And that's like the amount of time. And it's not even like, oh, at the end of that time period, we're going to like implode or whatever. It's that's the time period that I'm giving myself where we can't like have our growth decrease.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it's not even happening right now. Like, we're still growing month to month.
Right.
And so it's like a super conservative
So
calculation.
in your head, it's kind of like, is it fair to say that, the revenue that bring in, you've balanced it such that you're not going to need like exponential growth capital. That's not what we're talking about anyway. But the capital that you bring in for the company, between that and the margins and how you're running the business, you can start feeding that money back into the company and grow it. I don't want to say organically, but grow it naturally, and So you don't. That will be the source of growth capital. It's like what your users basically will fund.
Yeah.
The thing,
Yeah.
Period.
It's essentially that before our savings rate was very high because I was never reinvesting in the company, and now the savings rate is closer to zero.
Right.
But I still have that initial chunk.
Bucket.
Yeah.
Got it. And the one last thing before we talk about the next steps for you is we were talking about Mint. Mint was shut down by Intuit because a bunch of reasons. The most obvious of which is it didn't make sense in their portfolio of businesses. It probably cost them a bunch of money to run-ish. And they probably weren't seeing the numbers they wanted to see, given all the other things that they're doing. And the answer is when you're in a big faceless corporation, you just kill these products. You're like, what the hell?
Yeah.
This is a product. And it was free, so I'm sure it was a difficult tool to manage. And the reverse could also be true, which is it's you. Lunch Money is you, right? And you chose to build a business that you're passionate about,
Yeah.
and a reflection of you. It is an extension of you. What happens if you're like, nah, like how do you think about the fact that like people are putting their trust in you in a weird way and they're personalizing the business where it's not a faceless corporation, it's a gen faceless corporation. And you might be like, yeah, I'm done with Lunch Money. Now I want to go into AI bots for murder. Like how do people put their trust then in the solopreneur or the not so solopreneur, the bootstrapped entrepreneur who may just be like, yeah, this doesn't work anymore, I'm not going to do it.
It's a great question. I think from the Mint shutdown, we can see that there's no corporation or company that we can trust
Yes.
to not just suddenly disappear.
That's true. Or use any Google product, they always disappear, except for like Gmail. Everything else just disappears after a while.
Yeah, I think with me, it's a lot of trust building. So I'm very transparent. I'm building in public. This is me. So in a way, like if I shut it down, know that I went through a really dark period
Right.
of something. I
Right,
don't know.
right.
And I did. Like when I was going through my divorce, I essentially didn't make any updates for a year. I went on like once in a while and fixed bugs and stuff, but I was largely not sending out updates, like newsletters and stuff, and people did notice. And it wasn't like they were angry, like, oh my gosh, like you abandoned the product.
The product still worked. You just
The product
weren't
still worked.
engaging actively. Is that?
Yeah, people started to notice like I wasn't as active in our community,
I
wasn't, and they reached out with very like concerning messages, like
Right,
concerned about my well-being over being concerned over like the future of the product.
Got it.
Which was really, really sweet. Yeah, I think if one day I decided that Lunch Money is not for me anymore, I don't think I would just shut it down. I think there's a lot of people in the community
You'd sell
that
it to
would...
Intuit, of course. That's the obvious next step. You'd find a nice home like you
Yeah,
did with your last
I
company.
care about these people that have chosen Lunch Money to be the platform for their financial journey.
Right.
And that, that means a lot to me, and it's not something that I would just
Got
turn
it.
my back on. I think we could one day open source it, give it back to the community. Like there's so many possibilities, but I'm not thinking about that at all.
No.
Yeah.
I'm just and then okay. So the last question is.
Yes.
So we hang out in a year.
Love it.
What are we talking about with Lunch Money? Is it just like quadruple the number of users? Like where do you want to be in a year?
Yeah, I think it would be awesome if our developer ecosystem continued growing. And
What do you want out of that? Like, yeah, tell me more about that. I saw in your newsletter you had like an Android developer developed a Lunch Money partner app.
Yeah.
Faster than you see. Maybe this is good. Why did you do this?
So the
Because
developer.
now you have an API to maintain.
Yeah. Well, actually, the developer API was one of the first features I came out with.
Oh, because that's the whole thing is built on your own API. Is that why?
Yeah, and it, like it being a lot of developers coming on, they wanted data portability. They wanted to like create their own tools and stuff. And at the time, I only had 3 features, so it was pretty easy to turn into a public API.
I see.
But the thought process behind that is I'm not going to have the budget to hire engineers. They were very expensive. But
Not anymore.
yeah, but if I make developer API public, I encourage the developers to open source their tools or plugins, or even just share it with the community. I think that creates that mimics what it would be like if I had a team of engineers working.
Right. But now you have a whole other thing to support, which is this one of the reasons you hired somebody?
The developer API?
Yeah, because now there's a whole bunch of other feature requests, bugs. You have to have parity between the tool that you've built and what's.
No, I think it's fairly simple because we're moving to a point where we're redesigning the API to be more developer friendly, and the core app will also use that API. So
Right.
it's not an extra thing to maintain.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, right. So
And
in
no-
theory, you've got a developer ecosystem that are building features that they find valuable, that they'll contribute back to the community.
Yeah.
So Lunch Money subscribers will get stuff out of it.
Yeah. So for example, we are web first, for a host of reasons. One of them being, I don't want to have a team of iOS engineers, a team of Android engineers,
Yes.
and then worry about that release cycle. And so Rodrigo Martins, who is a Lunch Money user, and he's also an Android developer, he decided to make a Lunch Money companion app, and he open sourced it, and it has over 100 downloads. People are excited about it. We have a channel for it in the Discord, so you can chat directly with the developer. So this is very on brand for Lunch Money. And I love that it's enabling people to create side projects, to kind of, have something exciting outside of what they do for work that like other people are using. So it's nice. We already have a community of people that are willing to beta test.
Cool. So you're going to charge 30% like Apple, and then so yeah, in a year we're going to be talking, and you're going to say,
yeah, that
how we got it.
we have a marketplace of Lunch Money plugins and tools and apps. You want like the Zillow integration, like just add it on or something.
the
These are all-
forecasting integration.
Yeah, maybe like better charts. It's just trying to think of a way to involve the community more and not have just me bear the burden of all of the engineering.
That's cool. Well, really look forward to talking to you again in a year. No pressure. We have this on tape.
Yeah.
It's recorded. We will print it out on a 3D printer so you can have it in front of you. But thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. It's really, really cool journey, really cool app. So if you want to go check it out, go to
lunchmoney.app.
there you go. Sign up today.
Thanks for having me. This
Thanks
is
for
super
coming.
fun.
It's really fun. Thank you. And hot.
Yes.
Really hot.
Yes, humid.
Thanks for watching. Keep on building. And here's what's coming up on the next episode.
When it's done, believe it all for a shine. It's calling some love for me for a mile. The button on the soul and out for life. Nothing to